Hi guys, this is Stan here to welcome if you are new here. RF Kuang is one of the very few authors that I trust completely. Every time when she releases a new book, I know that it is going to challenge me, break me a little bit, and leave me thinking about it for a very long time. Katabasis is no exception, but this book defies readers. Some may call it genius, but some may say it is pretentious. So in today's video, I'm going to break down what I love, what didn't work, and whether this book is possibly one of her most ambitious work ever. In case you haven't heard about Katabasis, it is Kuang's latest dark academia novel, which also leans a bit towards the horror side. In here, we're gonna follow a postgraduate student called Alice Law, who is studying in Cambridge in the 1980s. After her professor, Jacob Grimes, died, she fears that she's going to lose this really powerful academic network that can help her to thrive in the future. So she decided to make a very risky decision to descend to hell to retrieve his soul. But Alice was not the only one thinking the same. Her long-term academic nemesis, Peter, also came to the same conclusion. But this unlikely pair end up navigating the dangerous court of hell together. While we slowly uncover the messy relationship between these two, think like Dante's Inferno, but mixing it with some cutting academic satire. If I'm being honest here, I was a bit worried at first whether I can connect to Katabasis the same way as I did with, let's say, Babel or The Poppy War. Those two series or like novels that I can instantly connect to because of my personal background. And you know me well, I have already done the reference videos for the Poppy War series as well. But Katabasis is packed with references to, let's say, Dante, let's say, cultural and academic tradition and philosophers. Stuff that I personally don't have any links to them. And you know me, I haven't traveled to hell yet. But you know what? It is not a problem at all. Kuang used this kind of academic details as part of her world building. Let's say the cost of hell, let's say the chalk magic system, as well as the banter with this kind of historical figures. I don't think you really need to completely understand, process, digest every details in this book. They are more for the ideas or like for the atmosphere. And if you remember from Babel, there were plenty of footnotes in the bottom of the page. But here in Katabasis, Kuang integrates all these details into separate chapters, which in a way make it more accessible. What really sold me though were the characters. Alice Law in this book reminds me so much of Rin from Poppy War, not in terms of the violence, powers, or like being a drug addict, but in her obsession, instability, and morally great personality. I just found Kuang is really good at writing complicated characters that you wouldn't root for them easily, but you can't really look away. And can we just talk about Kuang's brain for a second? Yes, of course, you can do your own research about Dante, about Aristotle, about Socrates in the library, but the way she notices and remembers minor details, let's say the streets and trees in Cambridge and the Wetherspoons pines, which I totally like as well, and then blend them in global mythologies and Chinese folklore, let's say the Weaver Girl, in a coherent fantasy world, mate, that's a talent. I just find it very fascinating how she processes information and spin it into something that is so layered and alive. And that is the reason why RF Kuang is one of my favorite authors. And if we're looking at the ending, the moment I put Katabasis down, I was left with this kind of weird, empty feeling. Not like I can feel anything, I'm not blown away, but this kind of book hangover that you really want to think about it more. Of course, I won't spoil you too much about the ending, but I just find the arrangement really clever. It ties together Alice's obsession, her fears, her sacrifices, and forces her into a confrontation that is both inevitable and heartbreaking. Through Alice's story, we also get a chance to see something that as a layman find it really hard to get to that level, which is to see how power works in elite institutions. Let's say the hierarchy, the gatekeeping, and the exploitation of students. I know that Katabasis was set in the 80s, but I think this sort of matters or issues still happen in today's world. It is honestly so sad to see how authority or like those in power care so little about the students. Those that want to climb up the ladder to maybe just do more research, maybe they do want to work in this academic field. But these students were seen more as a tool and can be freely exploited no matter it is physically or psychologically. One thing quite sad to read in Katabasis is on many occasions, Alice was receiving quite a lot of wake-up call to ask why she kind of having such a good impression towards Professor Grimes, and in a way it is almost idolizing him. She would get quite protective about her feeling and come up with so many reasons trying to justify or rationalize her feeling, which is quite sad to read. I guess part of the reason why I get low-key frustrated is we know that these issues should be settled. We need to find out the root of it, not to try to escape. In this story, Alice was not the only female scholar working in Cambridge. Once again, it just shows you particularly women or marginalized group whose labor is completely erased. By setting these sort of conflicts in hell, Kuang can use it as a metaphor to reflect different parts of academic life. Let's say bureaucracy, peer review, rivalries, and toxic departments. Once again, this encounters in hell how absurd and cruel they are. Mirror real experiences, both funny and bitter at the same time. If I had one critique, I would say that the last 20% feels a bit rushed towards the ending compared to the slow burn earlier. Maybe it was deliberate to reflect the mental state of Alice, and it is also reminds me of Rin from Poppy Wall when she is in a battlefield. That sort of messy conflicts. I would say that was the only thing didn't land for me. Overall, Katabasis is a strong 4-star rate for me, but the more I think about it, especially preparing for this video, it may get closer to a 5-star, and I guess it is like the magic of RF Kuang to me. So then I look up reviews on either Goodreads or Reddit to see how others feel about this new release. I would say it is quite interesting to see some of these comments, and we can check it out together. First one, Kuang's obsession with academia is exhausting. Then Kuang's office put a lot of research and thought into this book. The history of magic and idea of using paradoxes for magic is cool, but Katabasis felt like a vehicle to show off her research rather than telling a compelling story. We also have this book feels like an exercise in academic powers versus feeling like a story with depth of emotion and character. Lastly, it's more pretentious than her previous work. Oh god, then I really can't read this one. I would say the first 3 comments are quite fair, and I take the last one more like a joke, and I can kind of see how these comments come from. Most of her recent works were inspired by her Oxbridge experiences. Let's say Babel is Oxford, Katabasis is Cambridge. Maybe she just loves being in there, so she takes quite a lot of inspiration from them and writes tons about them. Setting a fantasy around an academic world is also quite a convenient tool. Maybe RF Kuang in a way want to relive all these moments when she's still studying in Oxbridge. Let's say going for a lecture and then we have seminars on certain philosophers, paradoxes, and blending them into a fantasy world can allow RF Kuang to play it to another level, which I find it firstly convenient and a fun way to do so. But is it really a showcase of research than telling a compelling story? Because part of the world building in Katabasis is based on real-life philosophers and concepts. So in a way, you can say the story is valid because we got such a solid foundation. I'm not a researcher, I just did my bachelor degree and I'm not that smart. But how I read Katabasis or Babel is not trying to digest and completely understand every concept thrown into your face. If you do so, it must be an exhausting reading experience. To me, it is almost like reading academic paper, trying to analyze the central message rather than going through every steps in all these principles. Maybe we can take one example from Katabasis. I forgot the name of this paradox, but it is like we have two statements, and these two statements are both true but self-contradicting at the same time. How would you see it? I don't think as a reader for Katabasis, we are not in a position to try to solve every paradoxes, trying to come up with our own argument. It is more like a way to present the story, if you know what I mean. Also, for this kind of dark academia book, I would see it as another way to write fantasy. Like I said last week about romantasy, Kuang's approach to fantasy is quite unprecedented. We rarely come across with this kind of hardcore dark academia book before. The concept itself is really groundbreaking. Here, what I want to say is, as a fantasy reader, we should just keep our mind open to new concepts, to new things. If you have certain opinions about an author, about a book before you even starting them, no matter how hard you try to get through it, you wouldn't enjoy it because your expectation would never be met. Same goes to Kuang's work, a blend of academia and fantasy. If you found academic work boring, then how would you like it? If you find it pretentious, even before you starting it, you would just think it is pretentious after all. Here is my conspiracy, I'm just guessing about it. I knew that Kuang moved to the America when she was 4 and she was going with her family. If you are brought up by a Chinese family, what I've noticed, or even some of you guys may notice from my videos, the way we speak is quite direct, if you know what I mean. You could say it is quite dry because we just express what we want to from my mind. There's like no filter, just say it out. So in the language itself, there's not too much like oh, saying that oh my god in such a high-pitched voice. That's not really like this way of expressing your feelings. So when we read Kuang's work, it is almost like this, quite directly to your face in terms of what RF Kuang wanna express. Combining with her academic background, and if you don't know, she is completing her PhD this year. So her writing style can lean towards this academic style. Then regarding compelling story, I found another comment. I will preface this by saying I've read and enjoyed some of her works. I think the core issue with Kuang is that she has the pedigree and academic acumen to write about issues like colonialism with a very strong understanding of their history, but she lacks the lived experience to make the characters facing those issues compelling. Here, actually, I am not too sure what compelling means here. To me, Alice's story in Katabasis is like a reflection of the academic world. According to Good Law Project, predatory behavior comes in many forms, from sexist comments to rape, and from one-off incidents to grooming, where a member of staff isolates the student, makes them feel special, uses academic excuses to build trust and get them on their own, and then tries to get them to engage in sexual behavior. In 2024, the Office for Students found that at least a third of respondents had experienced sexual harassment in an university setting in the past year. If you have read Katabasis, you can really relate Alice's story to those data I have just presented to you. Apart from sexual misconduct, a research found that over 30% of PhD students develop a psychiatric condition. Here I found another article from The Guardian to describe the harsh life for the postgraduate students. The pressure on academic staff can be translated to the exploitation of the research students and even leading to the theft of ideas and materials. All in all, it is always the research students being suffered in this harsh environment. What I want to say here is all the issues, all the experiences that both Alice and Peter gone through in Katabasis even happen in today's world. Remember, this was set in 80s Cambridge. So once again, I'm just not too sure where the compelling line is drawn. To be fair, the more I dig up about the life of postgraduate students, the more I found Katabasis is such a good work. Then we have another comment here. Also, the fact that this was set in the 80s did not come across until quite a ways in the book, which helped explain some tropes, characterizations, and plot choices. But she's so thin on her setting descriptions, this literally could be anywhere. This one actually, I would say I quite agree. If Kuang didn't really state anything, having this sort of like temporal clues, I would assume this was set in like today's 2025. And did you know that Cambridge was founded in the 13th century? So Katabasis can be set between 13th and 21st century. Those clues about the time was dropped quite late in the story. They are hints about what international events they are going through. So when you read that point, you'll be like, actually, you were set in that time. So this point actually I find quite valid because like I said, I thought it was set in 2025 or something like that until those hints were dropped. This comment is quite funny. I'm like a third of the way in, and the one thing that confuses me is the lack of setup for why they are in hell. They are giving up half their life so teacher can land them a job. There's no other way two smart people can show off their skills to do it. That's the thing that shocked me when I read Katabasis. 1 or 2 chapters in, we are literally driving to hell already. There were no BS, there were no build up at all. We will find out more about the motives in the flashbacks later, and to be honest, I quite like this kind of setup. If everything is explained to you quite explicitly in the very beginning, I wouldn't say we will grow our feelings towards Alice that strongly. If you have read the story, you will know what I mean. So I don't really think the point, like let's say they were studying in Cambridge and they're doing this lecture, doing this experiment, they're having this lecture with Professor Grimes, and like this is like the relationship between Alice and Peter. I don't think we need this kind of setup. And from the get-go, we know that it is going to be a story about Alice and Peter trying to save their professor. And for the reason why they sacrifice so much for this girl, if you have read this book, you will know that it is the obsession of Alice to trying to get into this strong academic network to land them a better job to climb up this mobility ladder. As for Peter, the same. So it is kind of like linked up to what I just talked about, the really toxic environment for the postgraduate students that really mess up their mind. They know that they're trapped in this really toxic, really harsh, really negative environment. But I mean, they have sacrificed so much in the very beginning. Let's say you need to complete primary, secondary education, or even get a bachelor degree first to get to this point. How you give up so easily? The only way you can keep going is trying to climb up this ladder. Ooh, this comment is really, really harsh. The publishing world has already decided to anoint her. It has very little to do with talent and everything to do with marketability. She is a POC from an upper class background who writes literature that educate white people, can put on their shelves to show how open they are to being challenged about their privilege. And her ideas are simplistic, black and white colonialism bad stuff that she beats you over the head with. So readers can feel smart for getting it even though nobody with a brain cell could possibly fail to get it. No wonder the New Yorkers loves her. They'll create 10 of her in a lab if they could. If I'm honest here, this is possibly the harshest, most radical comment that I have come across. I mean, if marketability or that marketing is that good, how on earth we still have so many negative voices against Kuang? Why RF Kuang is so important to me is how she make our culture being seen in this Western literature world. Correct me if I'm wrong here. The very first Asian-inspired fantasy being used is to describe Kenu's Dandanian Dynasty, and then the second one is the popular series by RF Kuang. Without their success, I don't think we can see the boom of this genre and how many great works come after. Let's say the Greenbone Saga, the Sword of Kaigan, and sometimes authors will play romanticy in an Asian-inspired world. I genuinely and honestly think that there's no one like, I'm a white dude, I'm reading RF Kuang work, look how open I am open to criticism to my privilege. I don't think anyone will have this mindset when you pick up her book, and I think RF Kuang personally would be totally against it as well. It's never just meant to be black and white. That's like morally great, just like her great character work. Like in Babel, the metric system works because there's like a difference in translation and how it contributes to a success of an empire. To me, Babel, Poppy War is a work to remind people, anyone coming from any sort of background, that this sort of events did happen in real life before. It is like a lesson. And setting these stories in a fantasy world can also attract a younger demographic, so they can also be educated with this history and culture. This is the reason why I love RF Kuang, not just because she writes about my culture, but also reminds people of the history. Here comes to the last comment. I'll never understand the hate she gets. There are so many terrible popular books out there, but somehow a decent, if not spectacular, writer gets singled out for so much dislike. That is what I've been talking about when we get down to books that are popular. I just don't get it. Why popular book, particularly written by female author, can get so much hate? When I think of popular male author, we rarely come across with comments like, oh, his work is rubbish, I don't like it at her, don't buy his books. Of course, unless they have done something real wrong, but normally you wouldn't see so much hate towards a popular male author. I know that there could be so many possible reasons behind, let's say, the demographic of those online reviewers, or what is popular, what is hype at that time. But like I said so many times in this video already, just be open-minded and friendly towards authors. What's the point of directing so much hate and pressure to someone who just writes? When we are in a time that we do need some more new authors, you know what I mean? So that is pretty much what I want to say about Katabasis by RF Kuang. I want to hear from you guys, especially for those of you who has finished this book. Do you think it is a great work, or do you think this is like pretentious? Any reviews about Katabasis is welcome here. Just put your thoughts down in the comment below. Thank you for watching, guys. If you don't want to miss out any fantasy TBR wrap-up, reading vlog, or any fun idea like this one, make sure you have subscribed to my channel and like this video. I'll see you all real soon. Goodbye.